Today on Math Science History, I follow 10 Black women inventors. Some left thick paper trails stamped with patent numbers and filing dates. Some left only fragments, like a quotation in a small publication. And as we follow their records, a pattern emerges. The patent was never the finish line. It was a door. And behind it sat the more complex questions, such as who gets pushed to the margins, or worse yet, erased. In much of history, invention sounds like a single thunderclap. One lone genius, one bright day, one triumphant patent. But in real life, invention usually happens in kitchens, boarding houses, salons, clinics, and on night shifts. It happens when a person looks at an everyday problem and refuses to accept it as just how things were. If we want a single scene for how invention can vanish, let's start with laundry. In the late 19th century, laundry was a grinding cycle of soaking, scrubbing, boiling, rinsing, and then the part that punished your hands and wrists the most, twisting wet cloth until it surrendered some of its water. Around 1888, Ellen Eglin, a Black woman working as a domestic servant in Washington, D.C., invented an improved clothes wringer. This device pressed water out through rollers. It was the kind of invention that did not sound glamorous. It sounded like a relief. It sounded like time returned to the body. But the story of Eglin's invention did not resolve into a patent with her name printed across the top. Instead, the story is very vague, and the surviving paper trail relied on a smaller, more precarious kind of record. It was a short publication associated with women inventors called The Woman Inventor, written by Charlotte Smith in 1890. There is no existing patent in Eglin's name, and the information we have on her is secondhand. So, according to Smith, Eglin sold her invention for $18, explaining that if the public knew a Black woman had patented it, white customers would not buy it. And that line lingers with heartbreak because it tells us that the marketplace does not merely price inventions, it prices inventors. So with Eglin, what changed was not only the technology, it was also the lesson. When the official record is missing or transferred, you have to read the silence as part of the story. Someone made money from ringers. Someone scaled manufacturing. Someone put a product into the world. But the name most people did not learn was the person who began with the problem and made the improvement. And that person was Ellen Eglin. In 1884, Judy W. Reed received a U.S. patent for an improved dough kneader and roller. The patent described a machine that worked dough through intermeshing corrugated rollers and then rolled it through plain rollers, aiming for more even mixing and cleaner handling. It was an invention rooted in bread, labor, and repetition. And it came from a woman whose life was, in many accounts, almost entirely swallowed by the archive. For Reed, the patent itself became the biography. Later articles emphasized that she signed with an X, a detail that became a symbol in its own right. It was a legal mark that said, "This was mine," even when the surrounding records did not preserve her voice in any way possible. So who got the money? The patent record did not guarantee that answer. A patent could be a shield, but it could also be a thin sheet of paper held up against a strong wind. The practical impact superseded the financial impact. Reed's design belonged to a world of industrializing kitchens and commercial baking, where efficiency becomes profit, even if Reed never saw the returns. However, what changed because of her was not only dough, it was also the precedent. Her name sat in the patent books, which was proof that Black women were not merely working inside American industry, they were reshaping it. If Reed's invention lived in the kitchen, Sarah E. Goods lived in the architecture of crowded cities. In 1885, Good received a U.S. patent for a cabinet bed. This design folded up to reclaim floor space and transformed into a functional piece of furniture when it wasn't in use. The paper trail here grew richer. Beyond the patent itself, the National Archives' educational materials described a file that included specifications, drawings, amendments, and correspondence. And this matters because it shows invention as a process, not a lightning strike. It shows revisions, clarifications, and negotiation. The slow shaping of an idea into something legible to an institution. Good's invention answered a specific social reality. People lived in small apartments. Space was not an abstract concept. It was the difference between comfort and strain. A bed that folded away did not just save space, it changed how a room could behave. And yet, even with a stronger documentary record, the financial story remained difficult to pin down. Patents did not automatically translate into manufacturing power. A person could see a need, solve it, and even secure legal recognition, and still watch others with the financial means scale the solution and manufacture them all at once. However, what changed with Good's patent was the expectation that domestic life could be engineered and that a Black woman could do the engineering. In 1892, Sarah Boone received a U.S. patent for an improved ironing board. It was much more narrow than most boards that came before. It was designed with the details of clothing in mind, particularly sleeves and fitted garments. Boone's patent read like a quiet rebellion against the idea that women's work was not technical. An ironing board was a tool, yes, but it was also geometry. It was surface, curve, and support. It was a device shaped by how fabric actually behaved. A Connecticut history account later noted something blunt and revealing. It was unknown whether Boone had benefited financially from the patent. And this is the recurring truth. The invention could be real. The patent could be real, but the money can still go missing. And what changed because of Boone was subtle but widespread. The ironing board became standardized, and improvements like hers helped make the tool more effective for the wardrobes people actually wore. In 1919, Alice H. Parker received a U.S. patent for a heating furnace design. Her concept used natural gas and included multiple burners with individual controls, a step toward what later generations would recognize as zone heating. According to the Lemelson MIT Inventor Archive, Parker's patent was not the first gas furnace, but still it was distinctive for its multiple independently controlled units. If Egelin's invention spoke to labor in the home, Parker's spoke to survival in it. Heating was not decorative. In winter, it was the line between safety and risk. So, did Parker profit? Well, the record did not offer an easy victory story. Her thorough design was not widely implemented as written because there were concerns about how the heat flow was regulated. Regardless, Parker had laid the foundation for this idea, which became a valuable precursor to buildings with heating and cooling zones and accessible thermostats. But what really changed was the conceptual landscape. Parker helped push forward the idea that comfort could be controlled room by room, that a house could be managed with precision instead of endured with resignation. By the 1920s, invention also lived in the salon. Marjorie Stewart Joyner developed a permanent waving machine and, in 1928, filed for a patent. The National Archives featured her petition and highlighted the practical spark. She experimented with rods, heat, and ways to create waves more efficiently. Her patent document carried a detail that mattered for the story of money. It listed her as the inventor. However, she assigned the patent's rights to the Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company, where she worked as a national supervisor. Joyner's career was influential. She trained students, supervised beauty schools, and helped shape the professional world around Black beauty culture. Yet the assignment meant that credit and control were not identical. The public could remember an inventor while the legal system funneled profit and ownership elsewhere. Regardless, what changed because of Joyner was enormous. The technology of hairstyling shifted. Time and the salon changed. Labor changed. Beauty culture, already a serious economic engine, gained new machinery, and Joyner's work sat near the heart of it.
We'll be right back after a quick word from my advertisers.
Mid-century inventions often arrived in the space between bodily reality and public silence. Mary Beatrice Davidson Kenner received a patent in 1956 for a sanitary belt designed to securely support sanitary pads. It was a practical invention aimed at comfort and reliability, and it predated the adhesive products that later dominated the market. And I hate to admit this, but I'm old enough to know what this sanitary belt looked like. I actually had one. Luckily, though, I never really had to use it because the adhesives were available. So I turned mine into a slingshot to throw rocks at the neighborhood boy. So it came in handy for that, too. The Lemelson MIT profile described another part of Kenner's experience, which was that a company showed interest in marketing her idea and then withdrew when they discovered she was Black. So Kenner faced a problem beyond engineering. She faced a market that treated race as a disqualifying factor. But Kenner didn't stop at one patent. She went on to patent additional inventions, including devices connected to mobility aids and household convenience. Her life underscored truth the patent office never promised to solve. You could be prolific and still be denied the social machinery that turned ideas into wealth. What changed because of Kenner was not only a device, but a lineage. Her work sat in the long history of women solving health and comfort problems that were often treated as unworthy of public attention until someone else monetized them at scale. Bessie Blount Griffin's inventions grew out of care. Griffin was quite an accomplished individual. She was a brilliant inventor, forensic scientist, physical therapist, nurse, and writer. In 1948, she was a physical therapist to Thomas Edison's son, Theodore Edison. When she worked with injured veterans, she devised an apparatus that helped amputees feed themselves. She had worked with Theodore to create a gadget that would hold disposable emesis basins attached to the back of their neck. It allowed them to feed themselves instead of relying on someone else. The image was striking. A person regaining independence, one controlled mouthful at a time. Her patent record was clear. In 1951, under the name Bessie Virginia Griffin, she received a U.S. patent for a, quote, portable receptacle support, which enabled individuals with disabilities to feed themselves. But here, the paper trail collided with institutional indifference. Accounts described how the United States Veteran Administration showed no interest in this invention. Griffin eventually made her invention available to the French for their use in their military hospitals. So, who got credit and money? Well, the patent named her. However, the adoption story complicated everything else. She did not simply lack recognition. She faced a system willing to leave a valuable tool on the table. What changed because of Griffin was not just a device. It was the moral accounting. Her story forced the listener to confront an ugly possibility. Sometimes a society fails, not because it lacks innovation, but because it refuses to value the innovator. And though this piece is about her invention, she was highly regarded for her work in forensic science. And so I have to add this in because her story as a forensic scientist is amazing. In 1969, Griffin began a second career in law enforcement, using insights from her rehabilitation work to link handwriting characteristics to physical health and publishing a technical paper on medical graphology. That research quickly led to forensic document work for police departments in Virginia and New Jersey, and she later served as chief examiner for the Portsmouth, Virginia Police Department until Virginia centralized document examination in 1972. In 1977, Scotland Yard invited her to London for advanced study in medical graphology. After returning, she ran her own forensic consulting business for about 20 years, examining documents including pre-Civil War slave papers. So Griffin, she was truly a shero. In 1966, Marie Van Britten Brown, a nurse in Queens, worked irregular hours in a neighborhood where she felt unsafe. The police response was slow, so she wanted a way to see who stood outside her door and to communicate without opening it. That need became an invention. Brown and her husband, Albert, designed a home security system using television surveillance with a camera mechanism, a monitor, and two-way communication. They filed in 1966 and received a U.S. patent in 1969. Here, the paper trail was both technical and haunting. The patent described the system in meticulous mechanical detail. It even gestured toward features that later became familiar to us with Ring cameras, like the idea of forwarding video to a remote location. But the financial story did not resolve into success. Later reporting described how Brown never saw her system fully realized in her lifetime, even as the broader idea of home surveillance evolved into a sprawling industry. What changed because of Brown was the grammar of the front door. She helped pull the home into a new relationship with cameras and screens, a relationship that later generations expanded far beyond what she initially needed. A measure of safety, a little control, a way to look without being seen. Her legacy carries an irony. An invention born from vulnerability became, over time, part of a new world where surveillance could be marketed as security, even when it raised new harms and new questions about who was watched and who felt protected. Not every invention addressed a household problem directly. Some discussed the shape of perception. Valerie Thomas worked at NASA and developed image processing systems. In 1980, she received a patent for an illusion transmitter. The device used concave mirrors and video transmission to produce a three-dimensional illusion at a distance. Thomas engineered wonder. She built a bridge between a real object and a remote experience of it. Who got the credit? The patent named her. Her professional record also carried institutional recognition. And the Lemelson MIT profile noted her NASA career and the continued interest in the concept. Who got the money? Well, as with many technical patents, profit did not automatically attach to the inventor. Patents are often foundations for later technologies without becoming personal fortunes. What changed because of Thomas was the imaginative range of imaging. She helped make it easier to believe that depth could travel, that a real-looking image could step forward out of a system and occupy space in front of you. Patricia Bath's invention lived in the operating room. She pioneered work in ophthalmology and developed a technology associated with a cataract treatment. In 1988, she received a U.S. patent for an apparatus for ablating and removing cataract lenses. In the USPTO's own historical story about Bath, the patent stood as a milestone. She became the first African-American woman to receive a patent for a medical device, and her laser phaco work influenced later refinements. Here, the paper trail was strong. Patent documentation, institutional recognition, and a clear link between innovation and patient outcomes. The money story still required restraint, though. Medical inventions often moved through universities, hospitals, licensing agreements, and complex professional ecosystems. So the more straightforward truth is this. Bath's invention changed what was possible for patients. It helped push cataract treatment toward less invasive, more precise methods. And it did something else. It placed a Black woman's name inside a realm that often tried to treat its heroes as if they sprang only from one demographic, one tradition, and one kind of body. So, what did the paper trail really tell us? The paper trail tells us that tangible proof of patents don't necessarily fix injustice. They show something more complicated. There are so many more Black female inventors worth noting. However, some have been erased from the margins. History tends to forget about women. Additionally, the victors who write our histories are sometimes those who push the lesser-known names aside and focus on the familiar. And though the patent can be proof that an idea existed, it is also proof that a Black woman fought to make it legible to a bureaucracy that favors white men. The space between invention and reward was crowded with barriers, and it still is. Racism, sexism, lack of capital, lack of manufacturing access, institutional disregard, corporate ownership structures, and the slow cultural habit of forgetting the people who make ordinary life easier. Still, their inventions remain. A wringer that spared hands, dough that mixed more evenly, a bed that folded away, a board shaped to sleeves, a furnace imagined in zones, a salon built to save time, a sanitary belt designed for comfort, a feeding device that returned dignity, a security system that changed the door, an illusion that traveled, a medical device that protects sight. These are tremendous inventions brought to us by some incredible Black women. This is the final point. Even when credit is delayed and money travels elsewhere, the world itself shifts. Their technology carried the fingerprints of these brilliant women forward into houses and hospitals, into routines so normal we barely noticed the great inventors. As a result, the paper trail did not simply record invention. It also recorded the price of being remembered as well as forgotten. Thank you for listening to Math Science History. If you want the next episode as soon as it drops, just tap follow in your podcast app. Math Science History is brought to you by caffeine. Delicious, delightful, life-supporting caffeine. If you'd like to support the show, you can find the coffee cup link in our show notes or at mathsciencehistory.com. Just click on that coffee cup. Your donations don't really go to coffee, but they really do help cover production costs. The MSH theme is public domain from the late, great music composer and professor, Dr. Lloyd Rogers. All other music is public domain from Pixabay. Until next time, carpe diem.